every conversation exposed beyond our thinking, beyond the obvious. And I have my special guest. Well, he's an attorney, creator, and caregiver, soon to be an author as well as a podcast host. None other than Miss Joyce Gerber.
Hi, thank you.
Welcome, Miss Joyce on Application. Can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Great, Daniel. Thank you for having me on. Yes, I am Joyce Gerber. I am out here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I am the creator and host of an award-winning podcast called The Canna Mom Show, where we talk about women in the cannabis industry. I am an attorney by training. I have two children. I am now going to be an author. I wrote a book that is going to be
Yes.
launched on 4/20, the National Cannabis Holiday.
Congratulations, Miss Joyce. I am hoping for more success. And today, let's talk about being an attorney, creator, and caregiver, as well as a podcast host. You've said cannabis is not a natural habitat, and that you came to this world through great changes, desperation, isolation, and rejection. What did desperation teach you about yourself that comfort never could?
Oh, it makes you change. If you're comfortable, you never change. So I
Mm,
say I'm great at transitions. And I'm a woman of a certain age. I'm 60 now. I've done a lot of things. I have two kids. I've been married for over 30 years. I am a lawyer by training. And I've just lived. So sometimes
mm.
things don't go the way you want, and you can't stop. So you just find something new, you pivot.
Definitely. You passed the bar exam while pregnant, proving
True.
your brain and uterus could work simultaneously, yet later felt like failure for not being able to do it all. How would you
Hmm.
say to that younger Joyce now?
Oh, you're extraordinary. Don't let the world tell you that you're not. My God.
Mhm.
I was born in 1965. My mother couldn't even hold a credit card in her own name. So things changed a lot. She raised me with two brothers and said I could do everything my brothers could do. And I did. I played sports. I grew up in the feminist revolution. I thought women would have, just because I had a vagina didn't mean that I was any different. As long as I had a good brain, I could achieve. And I did everything my brothers did, and I did actually go to law school, and, during law school, I was pregnant with my first child, and after I had my son, I realized the world really isn't set up for caregivers, and I couldn't figure out how to do it all, and they kept saying you could in a way, as Sheryl Sandberg said, "Lean in," but the thing is, I saw all these extraordinary women around me failing at trying to get everything, and their lives were just sort of going on, and we couldn't understand it. It felt like we were doing something wrong, and we understood we weren't. So just, my younger self, look around, get more help, be more of a community.
Certainly, and thank you
Yeah.
so much for that. Thank you for that inspiring message, Miss Joyce. In 2016, you toured a Denver Grow facility and realized everything you knew about cannabis was wrong. Was
Hmm.
there a single moment, a smell, a conversation, a sight that shifted your perspective so dramatically?
2016, cannabis was only legal in a few states. Colorado was one of them. I consumed it sometimes with friends, but I really, really believed all the stories about it, that it was dangerous and it killed brain cells. And, I'd feel good after I smoke a little bit with friends, far away from the children, never around people. But I didn't understand what it was. I believed the story that cannabis was a dangerous drug. Anyway, so my husband and I went to Denver, Colorado without the kids, and I thought it would be fun to do a tour of a legal dispensary there. We connected with a woman who had a business doing this. So her name was Goldie Soledar. She did private tours of the industry, and she picked us up in the back of her car. She had all sorts of different products, things I didn't know about. There was a vape pen and some gummies and maybe a joint. I don't remember exactly. And she took us to a dispensary where they were selling it, and I could see it was just people buying it. It wasn't anything weird. It just felt like a regular store. But the thing that really kind of clicked for me was when she took me to a grow facility, because and we met the owner and we went through uh, the manufacturing process. But it wasn't what I thought. It was a business. It was, it wasn't a dude on a couch eating Cheetos. This was a guy with an MBA who knew everything about the water usage and electrics. And it's a very expensive industry. It's a hard industry to be in, but it kind of made me see that it was a business and it was a healing thing. And all the stuff that I knew about it was wrong. So I wasn't planning on working in cannabis at the time. I was working, but the joke in my family is we came home. My kids were teenagers at the time, and I sat them down and I said, "Kids, everything I know about pot is wrong." They were psyched.
Awakening, as you said. You've spoken about relauncher phenomenon, women who step away from monetized work to care for family and then struggle to re-enter. What is the most infuriating thing someone said that you during the job search?
So I, again, kind of backing up, I was a woman who thought, I really thought I was going to be a professional woman. The children, I know, I just didn't really think about the children. But once I actually had children and I realized how much time it took, and I really did want to see my kids, you know, while they were growing up, when they were young, and my husband could do this. My husband had a better job with health insurance. I decided to stay home with them instead of always having other people raise my kids. It was a decision, and while I was home, I did everything, but no one was paying me to do anything. And then I felt like when I went back out into the world of monetized work after being away for 5 years, there's that big gap on your resume that looks, in the traditional world of work, it was inexplicable. People couldn't understand what I was doing for 5 years, and it just sort of started me on this weird trajectory of taking a lot of different random jobs that weren't always great for my personality. And I once had a man say to me during an interview for a job that I was actually so overqualified for, "Wow, you're awfully confident." And not in a way that was, a compliment. So I think it's this belittling idea that women, when they stay home to take care of other people, somehow they lose their ability to think and be leaders. It is infuriating. So it hasn't been fixed yet, but I'm hoping to, be part of a narrative that changes it.
Certainly. You said, I want to create a world where a mediocre woman can achieve like mediocre
No, no,
man.
no.
Yeah.
I really say I
Yeah.
want to create a world where exceptional women can
Exceptional
achieve
woman.
like mediocre men. But the
Yes.
truth is, that's just unfair. It should be mediocre women should be able to achieve just as much as mediocre men. We shouldn't have to be exceptional. People shouldn't have to be exceptional just to keep a job that pays you money.
Hmm. Certainly. You went to a career therapy where counsel told you family law was worst possible fit for your personality. How do you help women trust the instinct earlier?
Maybe it almost comes back to the cannabis. So my own story is I didn't use cannabis when my kids were little. I would, I was under a lot of pressure. I was a type A personality. I probably could have used it. I could drink. It was socially acceptable to drink, and it was socially acceptable to use pharmaceuticals. But it wasn't, okay to use cannabis. But the thing about cannabis is it slows you down. It makes you live in the moment. It helps you kind of see the world in a clearer way. That's what I don't know. That's kind of how I explain it to people. I was just always moving. I never had time to like process what was going on. I just kind of was like, keep going. And you have to stop. Like the thing is, you have to stop to see where you are. So I don't know. That's kind of where.
Mhm. So you cannot get the bank account for your podcast LLC from September 2019 until March 2020. Banks love cannabis but would not touch it. How do you run business without basic infrastructure, and what do you teach you about entrepreneurial resilience?
You got to talk to the people in the cannabis world. It is just anyone who stays in this industry and I say this about the women I've interviewed over the years. I've interviewed hundreds of women who stay in this industry despite the craziness with it's illegal. You can't get a bank account. You can't deduct normal business expenses. It's highly taxed. You also have to do all these other things to be like a good neighbor. It's a really hard business to be in. But the women I've met, they're like evangelized because I found something that was they've been told for so long is dangerous and horrible for you, and they realize that the story they were told was wrong. So they're staying here, even though it's hard to monetize it effectively. And the problem with that, really, the flip side is that the only people who can get into it are people who already have a lot of resources, a lot of money, who don't really need to go to banks. And the thing is, that's impacting how this industry looks. This should be a caregiving industry. This plant is a female it's a female plant. She's a caregiving plant. That's literally what she does. And this industry is a new industry because it was criminalized for 100 years, could be built in a new way. It could be built around caregivers and it could be built in the image of a plant, but it's still focused on the business ideals of white men with money, and it's failing. There's a lot of failure in this industry, and it's frustrating. And one of the biggest issues is because we can't access capital.
Mm. You interviewed hundreds of women building cannabis industry. Is there one guest whose story still haunts you in the best way?
I mean, there's sort of a conglomeration of all these stories that, again, I'll talk about the moms. That's really the stories that surprised me the most. So when I started this podcast, which we didn't talk about, but when I did start it, I started at a media studio, and they wanted to call me the Canna Mom, but I wasn't really a Canna Mom at the time, so I call it the Canna Mom Show because it's an interview show about women in the industry. And because I trademarked it the Canna Mom, I had women around the country who really are Canna Moms, and these are the women who are taking big risk. I mean, now it's a little bit better, but they have taken big risk in the past to get their children access to cannabis for seizures and autism and other things. And this is serious, and and it's dangerous. Like, even with women who use cannabis when they're pregnant, because it's actually good for nausea, and a lot of women want to get off of their pharmaceuticals, but they don't want to be nauseous all the time when they're pregnant. You can, if they test you in the hospital at that point, you could actually have children's services involved because it is still a Schedule One, federally legal on the Controlled Substance Act. Anyways, so the moms are really the stories that are just so powerful because they are taking these big risks, often because they are desperate. Talk about desperation, and nothing else has worked, and they hear that this thing might work. And whatever they do to try to get it to their children, and then they realize that it works, and it's like a miracle, and they can't understand it. I'm sure you've seen some of these shows. Sanjay Gupta did one about a young girl who was having seizures, and whatever. We have a system that this works with. It's called the endocannabinoid system, and the cannabinoids somehow are working with these systems to help reduce seizures. And those women and fathers, mostly moms, who are taking risks, those are the stories that really kind of stand out to me, that they were willing to go against everything they heard, because everyone was saying how dangerous it was, but they could see that it was working for their children. They could see it.
You started in podcasting as someone else, executive producer, learning the medium while learning the industry. What the hardest lesson you learned about audio storytelling that you could only learn by doing it wrong first?
Um, so when I was hired to be the executive producer of another person's podcast, I actually didn't know much about cannabis, and I did not know anything about podcasting. I read newspapers. I get them delivered to my house. I do listen to radio, but I don't even listen to much music because I can't find stuff. That's how old I am. So I'm like, people are gonna go and find I didn't even know what they were. Um, so just like learning the industry, learning about sound. I mean, sound was a big part. Setting up the interview process. Like, I had my own interview process, getting the guest and how I wanted to share their stories. Trying to make the show interesting and a little bit entertaining, but also um, accessible if I want a story to be told. I know, I think storytelling is so powerful, don't you? It's just the most powerful way to change hearts and minds.
Yes, indeed, Ms. Joyce, you say almost every woman you interview healed themselves or healed someone they love after cannabis become their last resort. Why do women have to hit rock bottom before discovering tools that could have helped all along?
I mean, it's illegal. I mean, the truth is, so this, I don't know if you know the story of cannabis, but it's we have 10,000 years of cannabis, hemp. It's all just been part of human history. And then at the turn of the century, we had issues with oil and paper and misogyny and racism, and they demonized a plant, basically. And then in the 70s, Nixon created the Controlled Substance Act, put it on there. He said temporarily until they could prove that it wasn't so dangerous. And they actually had proof that it wasn't dangerous, but that there it remained. So this story is really powerful, and it's ingrained not just in the United States, around the world. So there's a lot of shame. There's just a lot of shame because you're being told constantly this is something that's bad and dangerous. And it's a hard thing to get over.
Mm. You talk about cannabis for menopause, for anxiety, for caregiving stress. What does it say about our medical system and women are creating their own solutions?
I don't. Our, our medical system. Again, when I was in the midst of all of this, when I was raising kids and working and had a dog and a couple of cats and a husband and was like running around like a crazy person, I was offered pharmaceuticals. You're under stress, you need drugs, and I really didn't engage that way. And I did probably drink more than I should have, but I didn't know that there was another way. And my doctor wouldn't have recommended it. So I've kind of, and I'm like a middle-aged, upper middle class lady who plays tennis and wears pearls. Like this isn't my natural place to be, but I've met women, across the country and really around the world. I've interviewed women all around the world about, um, I don't know, spaces that I didn't even understand. Listening to your body, being more engaged, mindfulness. All the things that cannabis can help you enter. Uh, you know, Psilocybin, MDMA, all those things that I talk about like a scared old white lady, but I'm meeting all these people who are using these different ways to heal. And I would like to have proof that it works, but I see a lots of anecdotal information, people out there doing it. I mean, we need to have more connection with like, these regulatory agencies that, people who make money, um, work with, and the people out in the world who are actually finding ways to heal. And I don't know, maybe it's money. I kind of think everything comes back to money. I just,
It's all about money, money, money. Come to us. So you've been a lawyer, a caregiver, a rec band manager, a political candidate, a quilter, and as well as a podcast host and soon to be an author. Do you see these different lives or different expression of the same person?
I've had a lot. I think of myself as a creative. I guess that's where I am. I never thought of myself as a creative, really. I've always been a writer. It's just what I do. I've always done fabric crafts. I've always been that person. I'm an introvert by nature. And I can see the theme is really creating and putting out in the world. You know, I want to add value. I think that's even when I was in politics, I ran for a local school committee. I wanted to add value. That was sort of my MO.
Yes, thank you for that legacy, Miss Joyce. Your son called you a force to be reckoned with. When did you first feel like a force? When did you last feel invisible?
When do I feel invisible? Is that
Yes.
Oh, I'm
Yes,
always
please.
invisible. That's like my superpower. Are you kidding? I'm a middle child born in the middle of a generation, and I'm middle aged. I just like, and I'm in a generation that no one knows about. I'm a Gen Xer. Like we're literally invisible. That's our superpower, man.
Definitely. Definitely. You said for Generation X women, literally, people don't see us. How do you make yourself seen when the world is trained to look past you?
You just got to be yourself. You got to be. I actually just did a women's conference yesterday. So I will say, for most of my professional life, I was often like a one woman. There weren't many of us in the room, and we had to act like men and do our thing, and that almost made us more invisible because we weren't being ourselves. Do you know what I mean? And then I was
Yes.
at this conference yesterday, and it was a women-run conference. It was women and writers, it was publishers, it was editors, it was writers, it was all the business people all together. And the way they were talking about business, like they were literally talking about being vulnerable and open and sharing like your failures. And it was just such a different way of existing. And I'm like, this helps you be seen. Like, when you're not it's almost like when you're admitting your flaws instead of trying to always be perfect. That's when you're seen.
Certainly. You said women in cannabis, the men with money are not going to give you or to give it us. Is that true? If you had $1 billion to deploy in this industry tomorrow, what would you fund and is not being funded now?
I would fund all the women businesses that I've talked to who like, you know, yeah. What I imagine. So there's a company called MedMen. It was a big
Hmm.
investment out in California, and they went bust. Whatever.
Uh-huh.
I always thought if all that money, millions and millions and millions of dollars, went to just the women I talked to, just the women I've talked to, the
Hmm.
entire industry would look different. Literally look differently, and we could influence policy. Like we could actually influence politicians if we had more money going into advocacy and trying to figure out how to get things working, like hemp. Hemp is my favorite topic. I think hemp could save the world. I have the same position on hemp as the guy who voted for Trump down in Arkansas, who's got a farm. We want it. We want it. It's good for our
Mm,
country. It's American made. It can do a lot of stuff. We want to talk about American products, whatever. If we had some more political power and we could push back on oil and we could push back on, I don't know, alcohol and tobacco at this point. They're trying to like push back all the cannabis stuff too.
yeah.
Maybe we could change the world.
Definitely, you can change. Oh, we can change the world. You asked if the 200 women you interviewed got the money that madman got. What would this industry look like? Paint the picture for us.
So now, I don't know. It's a very complicated industry, honestly, because it is federally illegal. It is available medically for certain reasons, and I don't have the numbers exactly. It's less than 50, but it's in the 40s. It's very high, and it's actually recreational in I think 38 states, maybe 40. It's pretty close. So, and
Hmm.
in each state has different regulations, and it's easy to bifurcate us now because hemp and cannabis are actually considered different products, even though it's literally the same plant. I mean,
Hmm.
I would like to think that if we had women who were running this industry as they should, and I say this all the time, the women I meet are staying in this industry and they're staying in it because cannabis healed them. So they are healed, healthy people who are not just trying to do businesses and they understand all the business. They have money and resources. We're not asking permission anymore. We've had two generations of women who are allowed to have credit cards and like bank accounts. So, we're out there. Um, but the women could run it differently because they could do it with different values. And I'll give you like a good example just of a dispensary issue. So most of the dispensaries are run by men. There are a couple out here in Massachusetts that are owned by women, and they happen to be mothers. The regulations in Massachusetts are so strict that if those mothers have to pick up their kids and bring them to the work, because sometimes that happens, they cannot bring them in the building, not even the back room where all the offices are. So they have to find another place for their children after school. Like that is such a weird like little string. But if you had women running the industry, that wouldn't be a problem because they would consider those issues.
Well said, Miss Joyce. You incorporated that 2019, but could not get a checking account for 6 months. How does this kind of structural barrier shape you, and who gets to play and who gets left behind?
It's the same thing. It's about money. And it is better now. I will say it is better. It's not great. There are certain banks, but you have to really jump through hoops and do a lot more work than other normal, like a shoe business would have to do just to get access to cash. I mean, the other issue with cannabis too is businesses, you can't declare bankruptcy. Like if you want to talk about from a business angle, you know, and who's going to, and the risk. So it's capital. I mean, America, this is our thing. We used to love making money, love making money. That was our jam. And
Mhm.
if you're going to make things really, really hard for a new industry because they can't access capital, you're asking them to fail, and people will step up and figure out ways to work around it. But it shouldn't be this hard. It just shouldn't be this hard.
Mhm.
I mean, that just makes it harder than it has to be. It's a business, and they're making it harder than it has to be.
So, Miss Joyce, to wrap up our discussion for today, looking back at the 20-year-old hitching Miami Beach who discovered health food stores and lawyer pregnant in law school and real launcher fighting for jobs at 50, what would all those Joyce say to each other if they is not in a room together today?
It's interesting. I don't know. Look what you did. Look at your life.
Mhm. Look your legacy that you built. Yeah. Awesome, so Miss Joyce. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your upcoming book, your podcast, or anything you want to promote on our podcast?
Thank you, Daniel. All right, so my big announcement. This is new for me. I'm going to be a first-time author. I am
Mhm.
publishing my first book in April on 420, our national cannabis holiday. The book is called She's Taking a Break. It's a contemporary romance, but for cannabis lovers, I call it a cannabis romance.
Cannabis romance. Yes, people love support Miss Joyce because if you support her for sure more and more empowering books like this Right. So I'm inviting you to please to come over to my book 101 review and let's talk about your debut book, Miss Joyce.
Yes.
So, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and more to come, people. See you soon.